All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am Dr. Jim Gumbo Coughlin, and I'd like to welcome you to another Zoomcast episode of the Lagniappe Leadership Discussion. Lagniappe means a little bit something extra, and that's what we try to bring every time we do this. And this time is no different. We're entering a new mini series in the discussion where we're going to bring in current active duty Air Force squadron commanders, and we're going to talk about leadership and command from their perspective so that we can prep our next generation of leaders with current knowledge. Some of us more seasoned people might have some experience in command and leadership, but let's really get down into the people that are living it today, that are wearing what I call the pledge pin, the Air Force command pin, and they're actively wearing it. I do want to caveat, of course, that all the opinions of the participants today are their own. They do not represent the opinions of the world's greatest Air Force, the U.S. Air Force, the Department of Defense, or any other entity other than themselves. And so what they give is their stuff, and it's going to be completely unabridged. This is for recording. It'll be posted on YouTube, social media, and so we're keenly aware of the implications of that. So, all right, the format for this is we'll do quick bios on our two participants that we're fortunate to have, current squadron commanders, to talk about, and then we're going to go into the Q&A. I will take moderator's prerogative and ask the first question, and then for anybody that's live with us today, if they have questions, they can type it into chat. I just ask that they kind of put who they are at the beginning, and then we'll go from there. If we don't get any questions in chat, it's just going to be the three of us having a great conversation about leadership, and I'm looking forward to learning from you. So with that as a further ado, we are going to move on, and let's talk about Caleb. So Caleb is joining us from Germany. So thanks for reaching back to the west of you to communicate. I know you're good afternoon time for you. So he's an Air Force ROTC graduate and officer out of Wright State University, 2011. I think your mascot's like the Fighting Pigeon or something. But he's currently the commander of the 1st Communications Maintenance Squadron, which is, as a former EI member, I call it the EI of Europe. And maybe one day it'll get that designator. I know that's a dream we all have, and hopefully that'll occur. So he does have a master's degree in cyber operations, and he's had assignments at Offutt, Wright-Patterson, moved all around, and he's in Capone, which is Germany. So during my service, I never had the privilege of serving overseas other than Hawaii. So I was super jealous. I actually got to see Caleb just last week, and so that was pretty awesome. And so with that as a brief introduction, Caleb, tell us something that I didn't cover that's in your bio that you'd want everybody to know.
Not in my bio. Before I actually commissioned, I got to program with Lockheed Martin for 6 months prior to commissioning. So that computer science degree, bachelor's degree, certainly came in handy for that. So I tell people all the time, though, I'm pretty technical when it comes to ones and zeros, but this layer 1 stuff is different. I'm not the smartest person in the room when it comes to layer 1 stuff. So I try to be humble with that all the time. So that's all I got.
All right, humble. I appreciate it. It's a good commander thing to be, and so I certainly appreciate the humbleness. I mean, we have a great capability in our Air Force where we send people to a school where one of their mottos is that they are humble when they come out of it. So it's good that we didn't have to send you to that school to get that first. So, so good. Thanks for that intro, Caleb. Now let's go to Cody Vanderpol, who obviously loves beautiful mountains. We don't have that where I'm at, but Cody is an Air Force ROTC graduate from the University of Washington. That university recently had a lot of attention on it as they had a Heisman candidate. Didn't make it because the LSU quarterback made it, but they had a Heisman candidate. But also the movie Men in the Boat came out, and or Boys in the Boat, and that is both based on a great book, an even better book about the crew that won the gold medal in the Olympics right in front of Hitler in Germany. And so pretty awesome movie if you haven't seen it, but UW gets some credibility in there. So he currently commands the 92nd Communications Squadron at Fairchild Air Force Base, Washington. So he definitely doesn't like the sun because he doesn't see it that often, but he likes the cold weather. He attended the Advanced Studies of Air Mobility, AMOS, which is pretty awesome. We only get a couple in our specialty go to that periodically. So he's got that school. He's got a Master's of Arts in IT Management, Webster University. And we all know that IT management is an art. definitely not a science. And so he's mastered that. He has a degree in it. It's probably on a wall. And he also went to AFIT as well with a master's of science in operations management. So he can manage your IT, he can manage your operations. We're not going to talk about management today. We're going to talk about leadership, and they're not interchangeable. So maybe he can speak to that. But he's had assignments at Shaw, which I'm partial to. Yokota, Hampton Roads. That's not a thing. It takes a tunnel to get there. He was at the Joint Communications Support Element at MacDill, and now he's at Fairchild. And so, Cody, welcome to the discussion. Anything that you'd like to cover that wasn't in your bio?
Sir, appreciate the introduction and good morning from snowy Spokane, Washington. My computer tells me it's 18 degrees over here. I can't say I totally enjoy the cold weather, but do appreciate the sun when it comes out. So I'll just simply highlight my beautiful bride on the screen there. I met her back in 2006, got married in 2009, the same year that I commissioned, and really just excited. Couldn't agree more about the non-interchangeability of management and leadership. Looking forward to chatting more about that. And beyond that, really just want to emphasize I'm passionate about people. I'm a relational leader, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the conversation. But this business is all about people. So looking forward to the talk.
Awesome. Thanks. I appreciate that. I couldn't agree with you more, but this isn't about me. This is about you guys' perspective on command and leadership. And so let's kick this off. And so we'll do dealer's choice, and we'll go with Caleb first. And so the question is, I kind of prepped the battle space for both of you, is what is your leadership philosophy as a commander?
Yeah. So I started making this as a captain, first flight command kind of thing. I sat down as what's my kind of work ethic, and it applies to leadership. So in all things, I just try to put two big words, and to my squadron, I say it's my two big words: it's pride and respect. And I phrase it in terms of, hey, when we go to award ceremonies, we need to be hooping and hollering. We need to be out front from a pride perspective for the squadron. If you're putting together a product, whether that's a RA putting together a finance document, whether that's a project manager putting together a project package, whether that's a team lead putting together the pre-brief to go out the door, whether that's NCOIC, whatever role you're in, if whatever product you're trying to put forth as a work product, if you're not proud of it, roll it back, try again, have the self-respect to ask for others' opinions, so you can be proud of it. And so when you leave the squadron, you can look back and say, that's something I was proud to be in that squadron. And one team exists in particular right now, right? Respect, obviously, you got to have respect for each other, respect for your mates, respect for your leadership, respect for yourself. If you feel that someone is wasting your time, respectfully try to get yourself out of that conversation or whatever it is, so that your time's not wasted. Your time is valuable, just like anybody else's time, right? Time's all the same. Have the self-respect to do that, and obviously respect each other's opinions, respect each other's, bodies and all that kind of stuff as well. And those two things, I think go into making a healthy command climate. And so those are my two big words that I tell. I entered the squadron, with those two big words, and we periodically touch on them throughout the time. So that's kind of my leadership philosophy.
Oh, I certainly appreciate that. I like how you cage that as two big words. That's so easy. Somebody with my educational background can follow two big words. So I appreciate that. Growing up, we didn't use too many big words. Once you get past two syllables, that's a little bit much for us. And so I appreciate that, and definitely insightful. So thanks for that, Caleb. Cody, what are your thoughts? What is your leadership philosophy as a commander up there in Spokane?
Sir, my leadership philosophy, I boil it down to a one-page document that I pass out to every single person who comes and joins the squadron. It's a one-page document with 9 sections, and basically just rolls down what I refer to as my expectations. And it starts with discipline, because we're professionals, and I need everybody to be really good at your job. And it kind of then jumps into trained and ready, talking about change is a constant and the unprecedented times we're living in, with what's going on across the world, and our responsibility, wearing U.S. Air Force on our chest to respond to it if called upon. Then I jump into we are ambassadors, and how it's an incredible opportunity to be where we're at, and then we have the opportunity to go around the world and represent the unit, the Air Force, the DoD. And the goal with We Are Ambassadors is just simply leave the best impression possible with everyone you meet. I'd next talk about leadership is hard work, challenging every single person down to the airman basic that come into the squadron to be a leader, meaning be credible, be competent, be authentic, and ultimately make an impact. Really talking about whole person growth and facilitate a culture of learning here. I pause when I get to the middle one because this is number 5, and this is the very center of my leadership philosophy. And I boil it down to loyal dissent. And so I ask people what they think loyal dissent means. And I get a wide variety of answers. And every once in a while, somebody hits the mark. I boil it down simply by saying, learn how and when to say no. Basically, ensuring that even my greatest fear is me standing in front of a room full of people and words are coming out of my mouth and everyone is simply blindly nodding their head back and forth and agreeing with every single thing that I'm saying, not challenging me, and not trying to critically think and take in what I'm saying and maybe think about ways to do it better. Continue on talking about communication. Communication is critical, but it's the hardest thing we do. And just talk about the multiple delivery tools and the idea of what it means to communicate and how to get information up, down, and sideways. Then it kind of rounds out as far as developing the team, talking about making sure that there's no one indispensable. We don't have any single points of failure. I talk about delegation, anticipation, developing, and reflecting. We're talking more on the personal level at this point. I reference General Eisenhower at this point when he talks about plans are worthless, but planning is everything, going back to World War II, and just how that plan didn't go according to how it was designed, but the planning process allowed them to be successful ultimately when they were invading Normandy. And to close out with happiness is a choice, but balance is a journey. And it has everything to do with it is your prerogative to walk into this building every day and be miserable. There's literally nothing I can do about that. But I would submit if you walk in and make that choice, you're going to find there's other miserable people around you. Conversely, if you simply make a decision to maybe have a slightly positive attitude and actually bring a little bit of positivity into the organization, you're going to find that spreads like wildfire. Because frankly, the real secret to success is enthusiasm for me. So that's how I boil it down. Those 9 points.
Yeah, wow, that's excellent. I haven't heard anybody articulate happiness as a choice, but I really appreciate that, and I like that you share that in a codified document, right? The question I would have is, how do you evaluate whether that your 9 points are resonating across your formation?
I measure it based on the repetition, sir. The way I present it, it's a vocabulary. And so nothing is, it's not rocket science. It's not anything that no one's not heard before. So that's a double negative. So everyone's heard these things before. But for me, it's a vocabulary that I have to come back to, kind of like what Caleb was talking about, coming back to those 2 big words and checking in on them periodically. I measure the resonance based on the amount of repetition I hear other people use the vocabulary outside of my own mouth.
No, that's fair. And one of our previous chiefs of staff, General Goldfein, would say when I was on the air staff, he would say, get out there and repeat it, or tell, your words, tell them 10,000 times. And just when you think they're tired of hearing it, tell them a couple more times. And so, I know that we can have our own echo chambers in our own head. I'm a pretty verbose person, and a couple of the folks that are dialed in know me pretty well, and they probably articulate that and concur with that statement. But just be repetitive, and I like that. And I'd like to pivot off of what you said there, and let's go back to Caleb. So Caleb, both you and Cody are in command, but there was a time when you weren't in command, and you heard you were gonna, the DT nominated you, a squadron commander chose you. You got to learn about your new group commander, who's probably one of the top officers, certainly in the specialty I occupy. I'm fortunate to serve in, and so you're sitting there and you're like, I'm going to be a squadron commander. What was your biggest concern?
My biggest concern, ended up kind of being true, I would say, was my command voice. I mentioned in the kind of intro, I'm pretty technical, and I know that. This job command and leadership in general, but command, it feels like in particular, I would say has been 95% not technical. It's been all people, at least. Like I'll and so figuring out the leadership words, vice the technical words that I was used to. Right, you got to turn your brain on its side to start thinking that way a little bit. And so that was my biggest concern, and that certainly was a challenge for the first couple months here, just getting that commanders and like leadership voice, command voice figured out a little bit.
So just to recap for you is like, how am I going to translate what I know as a technician? And now I have to execute what I believe is the true purpose of an officer, which is leadership, right? That's our trade craft. I would say that's our trade craft. And so now you've got to execute that, so you had this concern, you got your guide on, you stepped off the stage. Colonel Reister, I can't remember if Colonel Ritchie gave you the guide on or Colonel Reister. One of them gives you the guide on.
Reister,
Yeah, and so now it's yours. Like the pin moved, and now it's your show, and you're like, great. And so, are you articulating that your concern bear fruit? And then, if that's the case, where are you now? Have you pushed past that concern, or what?
Yeah, it certainly did for the first couple months, I would say. That just finding that leadership voice, finding, being, I'm not very good in public settings, I would say, in front of a stage. And so literally every week we have what we call it our dragon call. It's a quick hall call, quick huddle. And even just that, like the nerves would just build inside me, and like finding the words to say and motivate and, you know, trying to do and kind of say the right things to get the team where I wanted them to go. Was a challenge, and I certainly stumbled in the first 2 or 3 months. I told people it felt like I was trying to run a race with a potato sack around my knees. Like I just couldn't get my steps right. And I feel like as we've gone through this winter, I've gotten a lot better. But first 2 or 3 months were rough. I'd say for sure.
That's fair, and I like your potato sack analogy. Having fallen on my face numerous times trying to do a potato sack race, I can completely empathize with that. So Cody, you heard Caleb. We talked about you're finding out you're taking command. You're gonna move to Spokane, Washington, which was definitely a weather change for you. And but you're going back home, so that's a little bit or closer to home. And so what was that concern, your top concern, before you grabbed the guide on? And did that bear fruit?
Top concern before I grabbed the guide on, I will say, is coming back to people. I kind of, in the opening, I talked about my passion for people. From my limited study, when I look at leadership and you talk about our trade craft, our goal is to empower people to get after what they need to do. And again, my first expectation is for everybody to be really good at their job. My greatest fear coming into command was that I would somehow, by my words or actions, belittle people or disempower or cause them to become less motivated to get after what they need to do, based on something inadvertent or something that simply I said based on my bias. And so that started first and foremost with my command team, making sure that I ensured that we had a good, solid communication across my first sergeant, my deputy, my SEL, that I needed them to know that I trusted them implicitly, and nothing that I did or said would somehow negate anything that they did. I read through, you referenced General Goldfein before. I read through General Goldfein's book, Sharing Success, Owning Failure, before I took command. And he talks about a few case studies and vignettes, one of which where a squadron commander basically cut his first sergeant's knees off based on just a decision that he made without really thinking through it and without really talking to the shirt. And so that was a really large concern for me, that I would ensure that we as a command team would be speaking with one voice, and that we would all be able to work together, but still have our distinct lanes, that we would be able to support the entire organization. And then by extension, ensuring that each member of the organization felt as empowered as possible to get after what they needed to do. As far as bearing fruit, I was really intentional. So that very first day that I took the guide on in the morning, I actually went to lunch with my command team and kind of outlined the fears that I just kind of highlighted to them, tried to build as authentic and robust relationship as quickly as possible. So for me, it comes down to authenticity and simply transparency in order to build that relationship and establish that trust. From a command team perspective, I feel really good about it. For the rest of the organization, when you're dealing with humans, Caleb talked about it before, that layer one. When you're dealing with people, it's messy. There's no other word for it. And so I can't say that I'm perfectly successful every day, but I am grateful just by the intention that I took. I won't say that the fears completely manifested.
That's fair, and I appreciate that candor. I'm glad you used the word transparency. I think that seems to be a successful route for you, and to have lunch with your teammates. So you articulated in particular, Cody, like, hey, I laid out I would call it commander's intent. So I laid out my commander's intent in a document. Bear with me. I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time in the joint world, which is spelled ARMY. So commander's intent is a big deal. In my current role, I put out director's intent on day one. And so, so you put out your commander's intent, my wording, you show your 9 points. You channelize General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower. So you channelize Ike. You want to be like Ike. And now you're executing. So you're well on your way into command. Can you give us an example of where you had a leadership failure as a commander?
I won't say, I'll answer the question this way as I kind of try and think of a better example. 2 months after taking command, my first morning wake up, I got a phone call at 2:00 in the morning from the first sergeant. I have a 1 deep cable dog staff sergeant who was frankly just awesome. And he was TDY to DC to talk about the 1D7 conversion for cable dogs. And unfortunately, I got a phone call at 2:00 in the morning telling me that he got arrested for possession of an illegal substance over there. And it was, it blindsided me. I was just really frustrated because, again, coming back to trust, transparency, authenticity, and I just, out of nowhere, people are messy. And trying to think through how to approach that. This was on a Friday. This is actually the day my household goods finally got delivered that day. And so I was out of the office that day, and I went to work on Monday, and I had a staff meeting on Mondays at the time. And this particular individual was sitting in as my RA for a time. And in staff meeting, I said, hey, we're going to be replacing this individual as the RA. And in my mind, I was simply just processing through it, and it was simply a fact. But for everyone in the room, they had no idea what had happened 3 days prior, last week, Friday. And so all they heard was, hey, this person just got fired. And I had to do damage control for about a week and a half as I was just like verbally processing, because again, I value authenticity and transparency. And I was in my staff meeting, and it was in the second month of command, I realized, I was like, oh, I got to make sure where I am and when I'm actually doing these things and the levels of transparency and authenticity that I'm using, because simply by processing out loud, I caused a lot of consternation, confusion, and rumor mill that I had to go kind of walk back. I overcame from it, but it was a really big lesson for me that you can definitely be over authentic and over transparent, and there's something to be said for making sure that you understand the environment you're in when you're verbally processing.
Yeah, I mean, first off, thanks for that, for being transparent in that situation and observing a lesson, right? As a commander, it's often said, you'll see things change on a base, right? Or in a unit. Be like, why'd that happen? Well, the commander in the meeting said X, right? I mean, nobody does the follow up and goes, well, why are we doing that? There's a great story about this park bench that's being guarded for generations within an organization. And they finally reach all the way back. And it's something like 85 years back or something silly like that. It's in England. And he finally gets a hold of the one person who said, when it's the way it's always been, it's the way it's always been, the way it's always been. And it turns out the reason why the bench was being guarded is the bench had just been painted. and they didn't want anybody to sit on it. And so like for generations in this unit, like 2 soldiers had to guard this bench. And it was like a shift that somebody did. And the sole reason was it had just been painted, right? And so what are those things that a commander can say by virtue of him or her wearing the command pin that somebody will take action on? I will tell you a quick vignette. When I was fortunate to be a squadron commander, we had this great idea. Me and my chief were going to do, we're going to sit down with each kind of category within our squadron every month and get feedback on how we're doing it as a leadership team and move out. And so in the 85th, we only had a couple, we couldn't take first term airmen. So we only had a couple, first 4, so E4s really. Then we had almost 70 NCOs, and then a really large senior NCO corps and about 13 officers. Plus 32 civilians, so non-supervisory, supervisory. So we meet with them all, and so we meet with our small pool of airmen, first 4 that were hadn't been that weren't out on operations because the EI community is always on the road. And one of these airmen who was new to the squadron was like, "Hey, sir, one thing we'd like is when we get here and we're training, we get old kind of climbing attire and boots, and we'd like the new stuff. Like we've seen the new stuff. We'd like the new stuff." I'm like, you should clearly have the new stuff. Like that makes sense. And so, as the 04 squadron commander, everybody will get the new stuff, right? We got the new stuff, you get the new stuff, right? And so the next month we're meeting with our NCOs, and we had this amazing NCO, and so many great stories about this NCO. And so I'm going around the room, and there was probably 40 NCOs in the room at the time. And I was like, anybody got any questions on any decisions we made? And this NCO, technical sergeant, goes, "Yes, sir, I got a question for you. Why'd you tell all the new airmen they get the brand new gear when we're putting them into climbing school?" And I was like, because we got new gear. He's like, "Sir, the reason why we put them in the old gear is because they're going to mess it up. And then when they go out on operations, that's when we give them the new gear. We don't want to mess up the new gear while they're training, learning how to climb, learning how to put on their pieces for climbing poles and all the like." And I was like, like, "Sir, maybe you should ask the NCOs the why before you make a decision." It's like, yeah, I probably should have done that. So I had to evolve on my like, hey, yeah, solving problems. Look at me, I'm a squadron commander, solving problems, making airmen happy. Only for one of my NCOs to go, "Hey, yeah, there's a reason why we don't do that. Maybe you should ask." And so, I'm glad you kind of thought that through, certainly quicker than I did. It took one of our amazing technical sergeants to recage my gyro on my decision making. So instead of going ready, fire, aim, I'll go ready, get into my OODA loop instead of OODA, and then make a decision. The irony is my chief let me run with it. Like he was like, "All right," he's like, "Ride it like Seabiscuit. Let's see what happens." And so when I talked to my chief later, I'm like, "Hey, what was that about?" He's like, "Sir, hey, you made the decision. I'm not gonna go in front of the airmen and go, 'Hey, what the commander meant to say was no.'" So it was a good teammate. He let me learn. It was nobody got injured other than the schlub commander. So anyways, quick vignette into that. So I appreciate that. So let's pivot over to Caleb. So Caleb, can you articulate any time so far as a commander where you felt like you've had a leadership failure?
Yeah. The big one that I'm thinking of, and I talked about my kind of command voice, was so my first sergeant at the time had been helping to plan a wing combat dining out, and he like written the script, and he was heavily involved in the planning of this whole thing. And so we were trying to raise not just awareness, but like enthusiasm to go all the way over to Ramstein. And you highlighted that I am on a different base. It's not Ramstein. It's the longest 15-minute drive over to Ramstein. And so on a Friday afternoon for a wing combat dining out, not too many people want to go. So I was trying to raise some enthusiasm, and I kind of poked fun at the I thought was poking fun at the master sergeant, first sergeant. Hey, this is going to be a pretty awesome a spectacle was the word I used, and because cert ski is kind of ridiculous, and so I was hoping to raise some enthusiasm for that. Those were the wrong years to use in an email, and I got an earful about it from Shirt Ski. So he corrected me. I apologize. Like I was like, man, that's not how I meant that to come out, I guess. So I learned that. Um, and then in the transparency and humility, I told him, I was like, I'm gonna have to send a apology to the squadron too, because I didn't do that right. And so and I use those same words. Hey, I'm not proud of how I did this. I respect Ski, my first sergeant, enough and more than those words that I used would seem to allude. And so I'm sorry, and I did that wrong. That won't happen again, kind of a thing. And so apologizing broadly was important there too. And so definitely some leadership failure there. Just the words and how I went about that was wrong. Needless to say, it was like three people at the command at the dump dining out, so it didn't work anyways. So that was a leadership failure all around for sure, but a lesson learned.
Yeah, that's fair. And words mean things and they mean things to different people. And, hopefully you guys are the type that you'll type out an email and then be like, hey, could you read this? Because, I know what's going on in my head, but when somebody else gets that, my dad would articulate his, when he was alive, he'd tell me that sometimes I talk faster than my brain processes. He had some better colloquialisms to use that I don't repeat, but anyways, sometimes we do that when we type stuff out as well. And so it's good that you had that lesson observed. I would give yourself some grace on not everybody making it to the combat dining out. We got to remember that we went 2 years plus, or in Germany especially, where we didn't do things like that. And so, we've transitioned to a force where those things that we might have seen as like that was the way things were done, we went a couple years without it, and they're trying to bring those back. For our junior teammates, they didn't have those, so it's not like their fault that they're like, what? They're like, why would we do that? Like, hey, I have to deal with you guys every day. Like, why do I want to deal with you on a Friday night? I say that tongue in cheek, whereas my bride and I, following this, are going to go get in the car, drive up to Raleigh. We have our command ball, and I'm the MC tonight. And so one of my comments is going to be like, this is perfect romantic thing you want to do. You don't see your wife or spouse or husband or whatever that often anyways, by nature of our command. So what we want to do right after Valentine's Day is drive 2 hours away from where we live and have them talk to people they don't know, but get dressed up. Super romantic. And so we'll see. We've had to reschedule this event too, so it's all fantastic, but give yourself a little bit of grace. I'm glad you learned from that. But as leaders, I would say that's kind of a challenge for us, is how do we bring back or reinstill some of those things that harnessed us, that built that camaraderie, that built that in an environment where that's maybe not so value added. And every generation has that. When my wife and I were lieutenants, it was about how do we make the O Club great again? That wasn't the wording. I'm just using vernacular of the time. Because you go in the O Club, it's super dark. It's super more seasoned humans in there. It's super smells like the 40s, kind of deal. And that, even though I'm came in the military in the early 2000s, that wasn't cool back then. Like, we'd rather go to a local restaurant or not do any of that. And so every generation deals with that. So I appreciate your candor on that, Caleb. So we talked about where you articulated you had a leadership failure tied to ski, right? Well, that's great. We can learn from a leadership failure, but let's talk about where have you had a leadership success as a commander?
So this last quarterly awards, annual award situation. So on the heels of another kind of feeling like a failure, we didn't win any quarterly awards or group awards, annual awards at the group level, except for Sergeant Ski. Excuse me on my words there. So he won first sergeant of the year, but our team didn't win and our airmen didn't win. I was really bummed about some of that, and I expressed my displeasure respectfully to my leadership team, and was told, you have a leadership opportunity. And I said, okay, copy all. And so very tactfully had to work through what I was going to kind of say when to the team, because in this group in particular, there is a sense of we're the little squadron in the group, and there's a big red one just across the way that likes to take all the credit, and so good on them, but it's tricky. And so bringing people in at the right time to say, hey, just so you know, On Friday, we're not going to have any awards besides Sergeant Ski, and I tell you that now kind of thing to tell you, help the team keep their heads up, right? We're proud of our work, and that's all that matters. The awards at the end of the day do not necessarily equate to mission success, right? Mission success is what it is, separate from awards, almost wholesale, in my opinion. There can be times when mission success gets an award, but there's just so many other factors that go into the awards situation that it's sometimes hard to equate, mission success to awards. And so I told the master sergeants like 2 days before, hey, we're not going to win any awards, and I said, hey, but I'm telling you now, because we got to go from awards to we had a group sports day. We're gonna play hard and play fair, and we're gonna not show them that we're pissed. That we didn't win anything. But like again, it's our pride that's kind of separate your pride from the award that you were hoping to go for, and I think we did a good job of leading the squadron so far through that situation so far. So again, to Cody's point, bringing the right people in at the right time, and the transparency and authenticity there was important to help lead the squadron through what could have been a really bummer day into being a decent day at the very best.
Yeah, hey, that's awesome, and I really like your quote of awards are not indicative of mission success. And yeah, one CMXS, when I was a squadron commander, is drawn down to less than 40 people. And so, to grow it back up and to be on the path that you guys are on, that's certainly something to be proud of. I'll tell you personally, I literally had the same issue yesterday. We had our commanding officer come visit our directorate. We have the largest directorate in our joint task force in our command. We were given the opportunity to coin 5 of our teammates. We kind of talked about all the candidates. I wanted to make sure our Marine unit was recognized as well. And one of our teammates, who was our service member of the year, we opted not to recognize her because she had won all these other things, and we wanted to recognize one other person. I didn't do the heuristics on, okay, what does that look like? So we go through all the awards, we present them, it's awesome. The vice admiral gives all these awards out, talks to our people. Great. Last night I get a text from one of the civilian leaders in that division. Hey, we're the largest division in the directorate, and not a single one of our people got recognized. That's been bothering me all day. And I saw that person during the CO's presentation, and I was like, there's something not right with, he's bothered by something. And I was like, yeah, here's why. So your troop, your soldier, was going to be recognized. She was top candidate, but she'd already been recognized by so many other things. We wanted the opportunity to have someone else recognized. And so what ended up happening is one division had 0. I have 4 divisions that I work for. One division had 0, 2 divisions had 1, one division had 2. And then our Marine entity had their own. And so what it looked like to this civilian leader, who had been in our command for 27 years, is the smallest division, second to smallest division, got twice the recognition of the largest division. 2 times 0 is 0, but got, 2 people recognized. And so I was like, hey, it's a leadership failure on me. I should have articulated that when I made the decision, and here's the why, and here's the background, kind of deal. So I'm right there with you. I will tell you, as a leader, that's always a hard one. When I was a member of the mob, which has 2 operational combat comm squadrons, vice the 1. So I'm just going to leave that where it is based on some of your comment. But when I was at the mob, we heard from our wing. Hey, our wing was in San Antonio. Hey, there aren't going to be any mobsters that get any awards in this quarter, which was really uncommon. Those 4 squadrons, when I was at the mob and continue to this day, just crush everything, right? And so, I was talking to my chief about it. My chief's response was, I love my chief, my assigned best friend. He goes, we don't care. Our mobsters do not need recognition from the wing. Our mobsters have mobster recognition, and they have your words, that focus on the mission, and they're okay, right? And then, he talked to all of our chiefs, and one of those chiefs is actually on the base with you. He's over at the 86 Comm Squadron. All the chiefs talked to their people. We talked to all the officers, and nobody was upset. But we led turn it, kind of like you did. And so I certainly applaud you for that. And I would say that is a very successful thing. That's a great lesson observed for me to have from your experience. And so thanks. And hopefully anybody that listens to this can learn from that. So let's pivot over to Cody. So Cody, you got to hear Caleb's great articulation of a challenging leadership situation where he worked with his team to lead them through, in which he looks back, and I would concur, as a leadership success. So, you told us one of your leadership failures or challenges. Kind of articulate to us a leadership success you've had as a squadron commander.
Appreciate it. So I'm going to break on a couple of airmen here. So I took command in June of 22, and that first deox that was required in the fall, like I think every single deox that's ever been reviewed, highlighted some poor communication across the squadron, and specifically the communication deficit was understanding of what different work centers do. So in a base comm squadron, the way the TO set up, it's 2-flight construct, and we're still set up in stovepipe functions as far as the work centers go. And I had an issue, and it was derived from some previous culture where airmen were directed to stay in their own work center and basically not wander around the squadron and go explore what other work centers did. And what that created was very, very rigid stovepipes where airmen just simply didn't understand anything outside of their functional stovepipe. And it became toxic because it became value ascribed based on bias. And so some of the answers for the deox was, do you take pride in your work? And answers came back with, yes, I do, but I don't feel like anybody else does. And so just trying to break down those silos. And it was fascinating in the fall of 2022, as we were talking about the 1D7 collapse from 9 to 4 AFSCs and how most folks at a base comm squadron were going to go to the same AFSC being a Q shred. And then we were just going to basically be delineated with SEIs. And so I worked with my leadership team to start talking about what a shadow program could look like, where basically new airmen would come into the squadron. As they were working on their 5 level, they would go through a formalized program to visit and shadow each of the work centers around the squadron, not only to ensure they knew where everybody works, but to understand the different functions. The culmination of this, what I hoped was going to lead to a collapsed communication squadron structure where we would have some more matrix support across multi-function teams. I haven't gotten to that point yet. I'm still waiting for the Comm Squadron Evolution working group to kind of see where that's going to go if it comes to fruition. But what I did get was a robust shadow program that had about 24 airmen go through it. And some of the unknown, unforeseen success, I had airmen in CE and at the wing staff agencies and in med group who caught wind of this from the airman network and said, hey, I'm thinking about either separating and joining, going into IT, or I'm thinking about cross-training because we're really big on cross-training in the Air Force right now into the cyber community. And I'm just kind of curious what the cyber community does and its functions. So I had all these airmen that would come and actually go through my shadow program to get an understanding of what a base comm squadron does and kind of what a cyber IT field does in an air refueling wing, which is just absolutely awesome. And the coolest part about all this is I had a couple of airmen that I tapped on the shoulder to lead it, 2 senior airmen specifically, and they just owned it and ran with it and built SharePoint sites and calendars and structures and really took ownership of it. There's an article that the PA came and posted. I was trying to get the link for it, but if you search Fairchild Shadow Program, it's out there. Just really excited to see where it's going. And now they've handed it off to the next set of airmen that are going to take it to the next level in 2024. I'm doing phase 1 now. Phase 2 is where I actually have an airman who AFPC gave me a ton of CST airmen. So I've got 10 brand new CSTs straight out of tech school, and my infrastructure shop is hurting. So I'm going to bring a CST airman who doesn't even have his 5 level yet over to the infrastructure shop through the shadow program because he'd rather do that moving forward. And I'm going to get him an SEI in infrastructure so that on his next assignment, he can apply for an infrastructure job somewhere else if that's what he's more passionate about. So just giving airmen flexibility based on their passions, and then watching airmen just take ownership and take things to new heights that I didn't even expect.
Wow, that's awesome. And I super appreciate how within that idea, you got support for it by empowering your some of your most junior leaders in the organization, who likely might even not have attended ALS yet, right? Unless they were picked up for
Nope.
staff already. So I mean that's tremendous. I really appreciate that, and I just pulled up the link. I'm going to post it here in the chat in a second, so everybody can get to that. But really solid work there. So we talked about a leadership success or leadership failure first, leadership success. And now, we talked earlier about leadership being a trade craft of officers. Well, you guys are one day you're going to, and for you, Caleb or Cody, you're going to take the pin off very soon. You're going to hand the guide on to somebody else. Well, you're going to hand it to the shirt. The shirt's going to, or I mean, you're going to hand it to your group commander. The group commander is going to hand it to the next person, right? And she or he's going to follow up behind you. You're going to leave the stage. You're going to have this pain in your heart, but somebody's going to follow you. And it's like that for all of us as officers. As you guys polish your field grade officer ranks, come lieutenant colonels, there's some major looking up to you. There's some captain looking up to you. Some lieutenant looking up to you. There might be some future Air Force warrant officer looking up to you, right? Might be a thing. Who knows? Might be a thing, right? And so they're looking up to you. So what is kind of your advice to that next generation of leader of not how to be you, but how to learn from you? And so I'll go to you since you're currently on the screen, Cody. So I'll go to you. So what is that? You're going to turn around. You're going to face the next person in line. Give us the elevator speech on what it means to lead as an officer, lead as a commander.
So the first thing I'm going to say is I'm grateful that I'm part of the experiment to extend command to 3 years. So I get the opportunity to be here until 2025, which I'm really grateful for the career field management team and just the opportunity to actually have the best job in the Air Force, in my opinion, for a third year. What I tell my CGOs, what I tell anyone who wants to have a conversation about leadership, I started out by saying I'm a relational leader, and it comes down to trust, in my opinion. So, in order to get those things, you start from a place of humility. So, if you can simply build a relationship, I love what the leadership development course is doing with regards to the soft skills of 5 voices or true colors or whatever you want to do as far as your communication habits. But you have to establish some form of rapport in order to lead people, because leadership comes down to the ability to motivate, and that requires some form of relationship and the ability to understand what motivates humans. And so you do that from a place of humility. You establish trust over time. And my technique for that is authenticity. Those are my power words. Those are what I bring every single day into the workplace. And ultimately in an effort to help other people feel their value, dignity, and worth, and hopefully align their future goals with where they see the Air Force going.
Oh, that's awesome, man. You two are dropping some awesome one word answers for me that you expand on, and it's certainly something that we could build off of. So I appreciate that, and thanks for signing up to do a third year. I know I just cleared one of our teammates to do that just yesterday with the oat, and I super commend you for that. I would have loved to have stayed in Squadron Command a third year when then Colonel, now retired Brigadier General Eric DeLange, ripped the guidon out of my hands on the back of a trailer in the 85th yard. Because we were combat. So like we were in climbing boots and hard hats. It was awesome. And ABUs at the time, because it was uniform change 7,000 or whatever. And so when he tore that guidon out of my hand, I said, look, they say Squadron Command is the climax of a career. I like to read books a little bit. You guys know that just a little bit. I'm a bookworm. And I said, in a story, the climax is where it's at. And then everything just falls apart after that. Right. So like, I was not excited to go off the stage. Now I was fortunate the Air Force, for some reason, let me command at the next level. But fortunately, even better, we had squadron commanders and chiefs that made sure my negative impact was mitigated. But, those are definitely great words. And so I'm glad you're staying there third year. Super jealous of that. And I know your family's got to be happy because you're close to home and you guys can watch UW play in whatever the the mega conference, super mega ukulele conferences, the big 95 or big 96 or whatever conference that's going to be. All right, so so Cody gave us some quick, slow one-word insights with expansion. So Caleb, let's get inside your head a little bit. You're going to turn around, you're going to hand the guidon's going to happen, you're going to move. Somebody else is going to take that squadron into its next, as we believe, evolution of that squadron. And you're going to walk up the stage and you're going to give this advice of what it means to be a commander, what it means to be a leader, and what is that advice going to sound like?
It's interesting you ask this now. I've had people reaching out to me as they go through the statement of intent, and individually asking, what's it like? And I pull up a note. I said, dude, command is like 95% people. For example, what to do when your airman gets in a car wreck, and you hope to God it's not a DUI, but later it turns out it was a DUI, right? I said I've done so little technically. Yes, I understand a little bit, but they're telling me about AI and ML, and they're talking about OM3 fiber, and I don't know what OM3 fiber is. I literally have to go home and Google it because I don't know. And again, I'm a computer science major, cyber ops major, AFIT. Like I know ones and zeros, but these things are so unfamiliar to me. I tell them very often that I'm not the smartest person in the room, and command is not about being the most technical. It's about being humble, having drive, and doing the best to take care of your airmen. And that, I think, is what it's about.
There you go. You're bookending with humble in the beginning and humble in the end, and I super appreciate that. And we all have our limitations. I'm always fascinated when, first off, I'm glad that I'm more seasoned than you two, because I would not want to be up against you guys. I've seen your record, so I'm good. Haven't been on a lot of DTs, and so it's awesome that you guys can translate what technically, whereas we just kind of, at least me, there's a lot of smarter people in my year groups, but I just fumbled along and just hid behind the smart people. But it's glad that you can transition and think about the people. And so gents, we've been going at this, if you believe it already, for 52 minutes, and I promised you an hour. And so what I want to do now is, I know you kind of gave us the what you would turn around and say, and not to be duplicative, but it was a natural thing. So I'm going to bridge it real quick with two quick questions, and then we'll go to closeout. And so just to kind of have a little bit of fun. All right, so we'll stay with you, Caleb, because you're on the screen. All right, Caleb, favorite movie and favorite food.
Oh my gosh. Can I have two favorite movies? Favorite animated is Toy Story. Favorite live action is probably Remember the Titans. Both quality movies there. And then my favorite food, so it's wine and cheese tour. We made pesto in Italy, in a little place called Nessendorma in Cinque Terre, overlooking the water and the rock cliff village. And so that pesto was the best pesto ever. And so charcuterie with the pesto in Cinque Terre, Italy, is the best food.
Wow.
Food.
Wow. I'll take that. Of course, charcuterie is two things, right? Charcuterie is an adult Lunchable. Charcuterie is also, I want a sandwich, but I don't have bread. I mean, that's what charcuterie is. But I will tell you, like, your articulation of the beautifulness of pesto. The only time I get pesto is I go to Mod Pizza. I put my crust in that. So I will take your word for it. Italy is a beautiful country. Solid choice in the movies. I'm not gonna fault that. Toy Story, Tom Hanks, Buzz Lightyear. I have Buzz Lightyear wings on my uniform, so I'm on behind that. And then, of course, how can you go wrong with Denzel Washington and the articulation in that movie? And I love the scene where he's like, "Are you having fun?" "Zero fun, sir." Right? That scene is tremendous. Or when Sunshine's like, "Just let him through." Like, you come at me, bro. So many great portions of that movie. Solid recommendations. I echo and applaud that. So, all right, let's see if Cody can top pesto with a rock view in Italy. All right, over to you, Cody.
I'm not going to try topping it, so I'm just going to go to the other part of the world. We'll start with food since we're there. Japanese sushi, not any sushi, but sushi in Japan. coming straight out of the water over there, getting at Tsukiji Fish Market, and having tuna freshly sliced and eaten raw is an experience that I will never forget. And I have not had sushi that good since that time. So I'd say that's probably what I'll go with for food. With regards to movies, I'm going to go back in time and talk about formative and highlight Braveheart and whether, even though it's not necessarily historically accurate, the leadership lessons and the just morality and human element of that movie is pretty impactful for me as far as just how when I saw it when I was growing up. And then since Caleb got two, I get two as well, and I'm just going to select the entirety of the MCU Infinity Saga as one single movie with regards to how I approach that.
Wow. I mean, you guys just ran with it like a typical squadron commander. I just gave you like an idea, and you're like, I'm just gonna write it like Seabass. I'm gonna go where I want with that. I do not appreciate that both of you went international. Like, I think that was a dig on the guy that never got stationed internationally. But I'm super jealous. I have spent some time in Japan. I can concur with the idea of your assessment, although my palate has never experienced what you articulated. And Braveheart, man, you're definitely my love language. I literally have an autographed Braveheart movie poster from Mel Gibson hanging up in my room. My bride and I went to Dublin in October of 2022, and we went to the area where Braveheart was filmed. They had just had their 25th anniversary tour just the year before, and so got to walk the area that was used as the castle. And of course, being an Irish person, and my wife's family heritage being Scottish, that was pretty awesome. So solid recommendations, gentlemen. I concur. A little fist bump. I'll have to show you my Braveheart poster. That was a gift from a friend when I left AFCENT. So well choice. That is a rite of passage in the Coughlin house. When you get old enough to watch Braveheart with Dad, you have achieved something. All 9 Coughlin kids are Toy Story aficionados, but when you get to the Braveheart level, that's the next level age promotion. So solid. All right, gentlemen, let's kind of wrap this up. So because I'm conscious of your time and you've given it freely, and so I appreciate it. So we'll stay with you, Cody. All right, this is your final thing that in posterity. What is this advice that you want to give to us as squadron commanders that you didn't capture right before the fun questions?
I feel like through our commissioning programs, and as soon as we hit active duty, we are always told to aspire to be squadron commanders. If you get that advice, I would simply ask you to think about the why and why that is. We've talked this hour about the business of people and how important people are. It's said that people are our greatest asset in the world's greatest Air Force. But we've also talked about the generational evolution of why people are joining the Air Force. It's not just fresh out of 9/11 anymore. I had a 19-year-old access into my unit the other day who was born in 2005. That is something absolutely to simply wrap your head around and understand the generational transition and not just project the fact that people want to join the Air Force and fight terrorists anymore. We have a totally different motivational set that we have to come to grips with and understand how we're communicating. And as we think through what we're doing in the Air Force and in the world, as we wrestle with great power competition and wrestle with the LOEs that Secretary Kendall is giving us to adjust for that, we need to walk through this crazy period of transition and find some calm in the storm, because change is the only constant. But if people can't understand why all these changes are happening and don't necessarily buy into what we need to do, then they're simply going to walk away and find something else to do with their lives. And though we can talk about our retention and our accession issue, it comes down to mapping out the future of the Air Force and how it can align with someone's personal and professional desires. That's my goal each and every day, and I love talking about it. So really just want to say thanks.
Yeah, wow, that was awesome. I do not envy Caleb because you got to follow that. So Caleb, you've already been given a lot of great advice to us throughout this session. So how do you want to come off the stage with your final closeout from a squadron commander's perspective?
It's it's hard to finish that, but also close. The words I've been thinking about. I told my team recently, there's only one. What's the phrase? Do the best job at the job you have today, and tomorrow's job will figure itself out. You can be the best snacko, you can be the best NCOIC, you can be the best section chief, flight chief, first sergeant, SCL, commander. You need to do the best job at that job, whatever that job is, and tomorrow's job will figure itself out. And so that's kind of my internal work ethic. Beyond, on top of pride and respect, is just trying to do my job as best as I can with the tools I have. And if I don't have the right tools, I need to ask for them, right? Do the best job with the job you have today, and tomorrow's job will figure itself out.
Oh, thank you, Caleb. And I appreciate the brevity and not simplicity of thought, but simplicity of articulation on that. So that truly was awesome. Gents, wow. Way to kick off this mini series with you two. So I appreciate you volunteering right out of the bag to be Lagniappe Leadership Discussion episode 1 as we focus on squadron commander's perspective. I try to take notes while I'm doing these, and I have a full page full of notes on just, plans are worthless. You're quoting Eisenhower, but plans are worthless, but planning is everything. The 9 parts that you articulated, Cody, to your squadron and your leadership intent, to be transparent, respect people and their time. You hit on that, Caleb, and that was awesome. I definitely concur with that for what it's worth. Also, awards do not equate to mission success. That's pretty awesome. I say that I'm going to go into a room full of people wearing 42 pieces of flare on their uniform tonight, and so that'll be definitely an interesting articulation. Being a leader that understands trust and transparency has been key. And I just say, gentlemen, I'm probably going to have to watch this recording a couple times because I definitely learned a lot from your perspective, and I really appreciate it. And I appreciate our teammates that joined us live for this. Please spread the word. We'll post this to social media to share Cody and Caleb's wise insights. This was episode 1. Episode 2 is going to be in person at Rocky Mountain. I've been hearing the snow challenges of Caleb and Cody, and then Cody had a mountain range in his background, and so might as well do the next one in the mountains. So we're going to do the next session next Wednesday, the 21st at 15:30 Mountain Standard Time in Colorado in the Broadmoor Hotel, which people like me normally aren't allowed to go to. That's why I go to Rocky Mountain, because it's the only time they'll let me go through the doors there. But we're going to do that in person. We're going to feature 3 sitting squadron commanders at that, to include a total force one who's actually dialed in right now. So teaser trailer, Stacy's going to be in the next one. And so it's going to be awesome. That panel of 3, we're going to do it in person. We'll record it and post it, but look for that. And then we're going to do one each month. And then it's going to culminate with 2 A+ graduated commanders who are coaches and leaders of squadron commanders down the line. And so stay tuned for that. But gentlemen, thank you so much for what you do every day. Thanks for leading in the world's greatest Air Force. Thanks for polishing your command pin. And thanks for sharing your insights for all of us that were here live. And then everybody's going to listen to that. We certainly appreciate it. For everybody else, have a great day. And as we say in the Air Force, fly, fight, win.